Good morning, everybody. For those of you who have not met me, my name is Robin Bridges. I am your state CERT program manager. Thank you guys for joining us today for our PER meeting and financial advising. I have our financial team with us today and my IT team with me today to make sure this meeting runs very smoothly. We will have a question and answer at the end. If you want to put your questions in the chat section, please do so. We are recording this meeting and we'll be posting it online for you to go back to and look at again for references. But without further ado, I want to introduce the important woman of the day, and that is Miss Tracy, and let her go ahead and begin the meeting for us all.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the CERT Periodic Expenditure Report, Preparation 101. You will hear me refer to that as the PER most of the time. That may slip in an invoice, but typically we will refer to that as PER. So you'll hear that several times throughout the presentation. I'm Tracy Lambright. I'm the Deputy Finance Director here at Volunteer Florida. And joining me today is Nicholas Revel. He is our financial analyst too. Most of you, many of you probably already have heard from Nick and have communicated with Nick. So he will again be the analyst that is tasked with overseeing the CERT grants on the finance side. So we're glad you've joined us today. I know that I'm going to give you a lot of information today, but I know that you'll find it helpful in managing your grant and helping to prepare your quarterly invoices. So again, just to kind of reiterate what Robin said, this presentation will be available to you, and we will also be recording, and it will be posted and shared with you. So you'll be able to refer to it, share it throughout the organization, and have our finance contact information will also be included on the last slide. So if you ever have any questions or need assistance from the finance team during the contract year, please reach out to us. We're always happy to assist you in making this year a successful one. So again, welcome, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Today's objectives will include understanding your contract requirements, contract compliance, what is allowable and unallowable on the grant. We will also talk about the match requirements. We'll take a look at the PER worksheet and the submission and review processes, as well as the budget revision process. And we will also, at the end, do a quick walkthrough of Laserfish, which is our web-based invoice submission portals that you will use in submitting those quarterly invoices. All right, so first things first. You should be sure that you've familiarized yourselves with your contract with Volunteer Florida and the attachments and exhibits that came along with it. You will also need to note the contract dates for this year are October 1st, 2025 to August 31st, 2026. This means you must have all expenditures finalized and incurred no later than August 31st, 2026. Please keep this in mind as you progress through your grant years and be sure that you make every effort not to wait until the end of the year to try to expend and match your grant funds. Next, you'll need to make sure that you have submitted all of your required documentation. Everything must be on file before we can start issuing reimbursements. So on this slide, it gives you a list of several documents that are required. If you have not already done so or are unsure of whether you have done so, please go back and make sure that you have submitted these documents. Not submitting them on time will prevent you from getting your reimbursements in a timely manner. All right, so let's discuss cost reimbursement. Most of you probably already know that this contract is what we call a cost reimbursement contract. This means that all expenditures that are requested to be reimbursed must first be paid for prior to requesting reimbursement. They must also be paid for within the month in which you are claiming them. So for example, if you have a payroll expense that was for the pay period of October 1st to October 14th, and it was paid on October 19th, then you would be able to request reimbursement for those expenditures on your first quarterly invoice. However, if you had a payroll that was for the pay period of December 15th through December 29th that was paid for on January 2nd, you would have to claim those expenditures on the next quarterly invoice, since the rules for cost reimbursement state that you must pay for expenditures prior to requesting reimbursement. Since in this example, the payroll was paid in the month of January, January falls into the second quarter. So even though those hours were worked in December, which is in the first quarter, it still was not paid till the second quarter. So this means that you will now submit invoices for this grant on a cash basis and not the accrual basis. All expenses must also fall within the contract year. So let's say you paid rent that covered the period of October 1st to October 31st on September 25th. Even though you paid for the expense prior to the contract start date, it was to cover the period under the contract year. So this would be an allowable expense to be claimed on your first quarter invoice, as long as it was in your approved budget. That's another thing you're going to hear me say several times throughout this presentation. Is it in your approved budget? It must be in your approved budget. You'll hear it several times. Another example is, let's say you paid September's rent that covered the period of September 1 to September 30th, but you paid that on October 1st. Again, because that fell within outside of the contract year, you would not be able to claim it. Even though you paid that expense in October, it would not be an allowable expense under this grant because it was prior to the contract start date. All right, so let's go over a few more examples to help you understand cost reimbursement grants. So in this scenario, you are creating your first quarter invoice. Again, first quarter will be October, November, and December. And you want to know if you can request reimbursement for these expenditures on your invoice under the cost reimbursement definition. Let's assume all these costs are already in your approved budget. So number one, we have background check costs that was incurred on October 1st, paid by check on October 15th, and the check cleared your bank on November 1st. Would this be allowable? Yes, this would be allowable. The cost was incurred in the first quarter, the check was made in the first quarter, and the check cleared your bank in the first quarter. Therefore, yes, it would be an allowable expense on your first quarter invoice. Number two, approved equipment purchased on December 1st was paid for on January 3rd by credit card, and the credit card was paid on January 26th. So in this example, this would be no. Approved equipment was purchased in the first quarter, was not paid until the second quarter, and the credit card wasn't paid till the second quarter. So this expenditure, even though incurred in the first quarter, would not be able to be claimed until your second quarter invoice. Number three, training certification costs incurred on October 15th, paid by check on November 15th, and the check cleared the bank on December 5th. So again, all of these occurred in the first quarter, so this would be an allowable expense on the first quarter invoice. Number four, salary paid on October 17th for time worked September 29th through October 12th. So yes, this would be allowable. However, the only portion that would be allowable would be for the October 1 through October 12 period. So anything worked on September 29th or September 30th would not be an allowable cost. All right, volunteer hours served and recorded for the period of September 1st to December 31st. So again, volunteer hours, we all know are allowable. However, the only portion of the hours that would be allowable would be the October 1 through the December 31st. So any of those hours that were served in September would not be allowable. All right, and finally, one more. Registration fees purchased on January 5th, paid by credit card on January 5th, and the credit card statement paid on February 2nd. All right, so all of these occurred in the second quarter, so these would not be first quarter expenses, so you would not be allowed to claim these on a first quarter, but a second quarter invoice. All right, so when using credit card payments, when we're using a credit card to make payments, we use the date the credit card statement was paid to determine the month the expenditure can be claimed. And several of those examples I talked about the credit card, you purchasing by credit card and then paying the credit card. So we use the date the credit card was paid. That's because, let's say you go to Amazon, you purchase supplies and materials, and you use the credit card. So yes, Amazon received payment from the credit card company for the purchases. However, you still owe the credit card company for those purchases. Therefore, the expenditures are not yet paid for. So the credit card must be paid before you can claim an expenditure for reimbursement. All right, so I hope those examples were helpful to you in determining which expenditures could be claimed on which invoice paid and based on those paid dates. As always, remember the expense must be in your approved budget. All right, again, it is very important that you read your contract and be familiar with all provisions and requirements and exhibits. Pay attention to all due dates and all required reporting, and make sure you submit timely and complete invoices by the due date. Being compliant will ensure that you are not charged with any paybacks for unallowable costs, that there are no delays in processing your reimbursement, and that there are no forfeiture of payments. This will allow for a smooth grant year and allow you to fully expend your grant funds and meet your required match. So some important dates to remember. Quarterly invoices will be due to Volunteer Florida by the 15th of the month following the end of each quarter and must include that periodic expenditure report form, which is the PER or PER. This is one of your contract exhibits, so you all will have access to that. It is in Excel. Right here, note your actual quarterly due dates. So that first quarterly invoice will be due January 15th. The next one, April 15th, the one after that, July 15th, and then the fourth quarter invoice will be due by September 15th. Contracts also allow you to submit a final invoice, which can be submitted no later than 30 days after the contract ends. So if you need to submit one more invoice after that final September 15th invoice, you have until September 30th to do so. Most of the time, a lot of things we see on that invoice would be something that was paid in September for the time that was worked in August. Because, you know, under that cost reimbursement definition, you cannot put something on that fourth quarter invoice that was paid in September. So a lot of times that's what we'll see on that final invoice. Other things that can go on a final invoice are, say, you were unable to provide supporting documentation. And we removed it from, you know, a previous invoice. You can use that final invoice that if you were able to get that documentation, you can use that invoice to submit that expense for reimbursement. Quick note, if you are not going to, for some reason, submit a quarterly invoice for any given quarter, you must notify us in writing that you do not intend on submitting the invoice. That notification should be sent directly to your program manager and or one of the finance contacts. In some cases, keep in mind you will be asked to provide a spend down plan if you do not submit invoices as required. If for some reason, say you need more time to gather some documentation and need to request an extension, you may do so, but it must also be in writing to your program manager and or one of the finance contacts. And again, it must be done prior to the due date. We will then review all requests and provide you with an approval. And one more piece of information. If any of these due dates that I talked about falls on a weekend or a holiday, the due date will be moved to the next business day. So if the 15th falls on a Saturday or Sunday, you have until that Monday. All right. Per the contract with Volunteer Florida, grantees must also expend and request reimbursement for at least 50% of their grant funds no later than June 30th or the end of the third quarter. And then grantees must also expend 100% of their grant funds no later than August 31st. Volunteer Florida reserves the right to reallocate any funds from grantees that have not expended before that June 30th deadline. Also, just a quick note, failure to expend 50% by June 30th may impact future consideration for other CERT and Citizen Corps grants. Also, at least one periodic expenditure report, or PER, must be submitted by Q3. Failure to submit one of these by Q3 will result in withholding of funds, reallocation of funds, or a requirement to pay back any already dispersed funds. So please keep this in mind as you move through the grant year, ensure you are expending your funds and providing proper match expenditures on a timely basis. All right, so let's now talk about allowable costs. So costs that are eligible for reimbursement, and here's that saying again, all costs must be in your approved budget. So anything that's allowable is already in your approved budget. CERT grant costs must also be related to the following as noted in the NOFO. And again, you can visit any of these sites that are noted for further directions and information. If you have any question on if something may be allowable on one of these budget categories. You've got, of course, planning, organization, training, exercise, equipment, and management and admin. Again, management and admin cannot exceed 5% of your total grant award. All right, moving on to unallowable costs. Of course, any costs that are not already in your approved budget will not be allowable. Food and beverages purchased but not sent to VF for processing through the DEM at least 25 days prior to the event and approved and in your approved budget. Any per diem rates claimed over the state of Florida daily rate of $36 per day. Any mileage claimed over the state of Florida rate of 0.445 cents per mile. Training that does not directly relate to your scope of your program and benefit the CERT program. Taxes of any kind, and volunteer hours claimed over the Florida Independent Sector rate of $33 per hour. Now, just a quick note on those. These rates typically increase each year around April. So again, if we have an increase in those rates during the contract year, we will notify you and you'll be able to use the new rate moving forward from the date of notification. All right, and this slide is just for those of you who do have travel in your approved budgets. You know that we follow the state of Florida travel rules, so this is just a quick overview of those. Again, the maximum mileage rate is 0.445 cents per mile. If your organization reimburses at a rate less than that, you must use that rate. And if your organization reimburses at a rate higher than that, the maximum rate we will be able to reimburse on this grant is, again, the 0.445 cents per mile. There is no reimbursement for mileage and gas. It's one or the other. And it must also be which is most cost efficient for using the state/federal funds. Lodging cannot exceed $225 per night. And then everybody knows about these per diem rates for the state of Florida. They have not changed in decades. It is still at the $36 per day. Breakfast cannot exceed $6. Lunch cannot exceed $11, and dinner cannot exceed $19. And at the bottom of the slide, it gives you the time periods in which you use to calculate which meals that you would be eligible for based on those travel times. All right, moving right along, let's talk about match. So all of you should be aware that there is a dollar for dollar match on this grant. This means that you must meet 100% on all funds received. Match, of course, can be cash or in kind. We do allow you to use state or federal funds to meet the match as long as your funder is aware and has approved you to do so. You cannot use match that has already been used to match other funding sources. We would call that double dipping, and that's not allowable. And again, match must be documented. It must also be included in your approved budget. And so also one unique thing about the grant is that it does allow for the volunteer hours. You know, we touched on that just a moment ago. Hours must be served within the contract period of October 1st through August 31st, 2026. Must be documented and provided along with your quarterly invoice. I have some sample documentation I will show you here later in the presentation. And I do have a couple forms that have been used in the past. So I can show you a sample of that, but it has to include the name of the volunteer, the dates and times of the volunteer hours, the number of hours, and it has to be certified with a signature. And again, those hours must be valued at $33 per hour. Also, match must be met before you will receive all of your state funds. The same documentation will be required for match expenditures as it is for your reimbursable expenditures, which again, we will have another section where we talk about what that supporting documentation looks like. We do stress that you do not wait to the end of your contract year to submit for your match expenditures, as reimbursements can and will be held until proper match is reported and documented. When this happens, a grantee is more likely to not have match expenditures and can put themselves in a situation where funds have to be returned so that the match is met. And since we don't want anybody to be in that situation, we ask for you to be not waiting until the end to get those submitted. We will also monitor this very closely. We have internal meetings on a quarterly basis with our program and finance staff to go over budget to actuals. And we do review this and we will report that to you. So I want you to be on the lookout for those communications in regard to your grant and match expenditures and making sure that you're meeting compliance with that. I can't stress enough how important it is to ensure that you are meeting compliance. Again, if you don't meet the match requirements for the funds expended, the allowable grant funds will be adjusted and you will only receive funds equal to the match funds that you have provided documentation for. If we have already paid out funds and you don't meet match, you will be required to return any overpaid funds within 30 days. So for example, if your grant is a $5,000 grant, then you also have a $5,000 match requirement. If you only provide documentation for $4,652 in match expenditures, the maximum amount of CERT funds that you can receive from the grant will be $4,652. All right, so this is the PER, the Periodic Expense Report. This is also, as I mentioned earlier, one of your contract exhibits. It's in Excel. It has formulas built in for you. So we ask that you use it and complete it in Excel and ensure that the formulas are calculating correctly, especially if you add more line items to a section. All right, so you will use this form to submit with each of your quarterly invoices. So you will fill this out, you will include all of your supporting documentation, and that's what you will submit. The form will need to be filled out to the top. You will put your agency name, your program name, you will put your invoice dates. As you see in this example, it's got the first quarter, so it'll say October 1st to December 31st. And then you will report your expenditures. For those expenditures that you're wanting to be reimbursed for, you will report them in that first column that says CERT/Citizen Corps. For those expenditures you are providing as match, you will put in that second column that says match. Again, make sure if you're adding lines that those formulas include those added line items and that the form calculates correctly for you. You will also need to sign at the bottom in the highlighted yellow where it says approved by and date it before submitting it to us. All right, so moving right along, supporting documentation. So I said that you're going to provide supporting documentation for your expenditures. So this is going to be the documentation that we'll be looking for in each of the sections. You'll notice there's a common theme among most where it's going to be an invoice and a proof of payment. So any of your costs in that planning section, you'll want to provide copies of your completed plan, contracts or agreements with any of consultants or subcontractors that you've used. If you have time, if you're using an employee's time, they must have timesheets Timesheets must note specific CERT grant activities on them. They must be certified, signed and dated by the employee and the supervisor for each pay period, and they must include pay period dates on them. They should match. Your pay period dates should match the dates that are in the timesheet. Also, you'll be required to provide a proof of payment for that time. That can be in the form of a pay stub, an earning statement, a payroll journal, whatever your organization is able to provide. That documentation must also include those same pay period dates on the timesheet, show the pay date, and you must also provide documentation that the payroll was paid. So that could, be through your bank statement that's noting that full payroll coming through and the date that it was paid. Any invoices or receipts, they must be provided. They must also be itemized. If you're using a check to make the payment, then you'll need to provide a copy of the canceled check. So we need to prove that that check has cleared the bank. So you can provide a copy of the check that shows the cancellation that it's gone through, or again, a copy of your bank statement noting that that check has cleared the bank. And again, the note about the credit card. If you pay by credit card, we'll need a copy of that invoice or receipt, making sure that that is itemized and detailed. Other support of that expense, along with a copy of that credit card statement that notes the charge, and then proof of the credit card statement. And you'll see that same information for most of these sections. Again, organization, same thing. Timesheets, proof of payments, itemized receipts, copies of canceled checks, bank statements, proof that things were paid. Go ahead and move on. Same thing. It's kind of common among all of the sections. All right, training. So under training, it's going to be the same information. However, when you attend a training, you have to provide certificates, sign-in sheets, or the instructor certified rosters, making sure that documentation includes titles, dates, and times, and agendas are required, so making sure those are submitted as well. If you're conducting training, you must also provide sign-in sheets or instructor certified rosters that includes titles and dates and any course material, and of course, again, the agenda. Any applicable procurement support. So if you're required to do that, we'll want to see that as well. And again, the same information, itemized detailed receipts, copies of canceled checks, credit card statements, proof of payments. We want to make sure all documentation that you're providing must be clearly visible. If you'd like to highlight on your documents for us, make notes on the documents for us, circle it, anything that you can do to help us and aid us in that review, the better. Again, exercise. So when conducting an exercise, you must provide an after action report or an improvement plan, and of course, timesheets again with those titles, dates, and times. And then the same thing, if paid by check, copy of the canceled check, if paid by credit card, those receipts, the credit card statement, and again, proof of payment for that credit card statement. When participating in an exercise, again, certificates, sign-in sheets, instructor certified rosters, same thing as training. All right, equipment. So under equipment, you notice when you guys were creating your budgets, we had asked you to provide an AEL reference number from the authorized equipment list, making sure that you've included that. Do not use the generic number if there was a specific number for that equipment. Again, those are in your budget. So making sure you're following along with that and including those. Again, the same things, invoices, itemized receipts, whatever direct support you have for those expenses, and then of course, proof of payment. If this includes any type of services or maintenance agreements you've gotten into, those need to be provided as well. All right, and then management and admin, if that's in your approved budget as well. If you're using, typically people use salary dollars for that. So again, timesheets. If you are planning to use salary dollars and claimed salary, you need to make sure that a timesheet is done. I know several organizations don't use timesheets. This grant requires timesheets, so it will be required. If you're unable to show us timesheets, then you won't be able to claim the salary dollars on the grant. So making sure if you're not doing timesheets that you're creating something to use with this grant, and noting that those, the hours that are specific to those CERT grant activities. Again, they have to be certified, which means they have to have that certification statement, and that they're signed and dated by the employee and supervisor and include the pay period dates. Again, the same thing, proof of payment, pay stubs, earning statements, copy of the bank statement showing payroll was paid. And then the same song and dance for all the expenses, invoices, detailed receipts, any support you have for those expenses, and then proof of payment. Also, remember, management and admin cannot exceed 5% of the grant, which, as long as you're following your budget, you should be good there. All right, so as I mentioned, I had a few samples of documents to kind of just highlight and show you what we're looking for. We know that not everybody's documentation is going to look exactly the same. So we want to help you determine, what we're looking for. So when you're looking through your organization's documentation, you can make sure it has what we're looking for. All right, so the first thing is a timesheet. Go ahead. So this is a sample timesheet. Of course, what we're looking for there, again, is that employee name, company name, the pay period, start and end date. Note that they match the pay period start and end date on the timesheet. You see it's got those CERT hours and the amount of hours that person served. In this case, they work two different types of positions. So their CERT hours are on one line, administration's on another. It totals them at the bottom. So it's got the 80 hours for that pay period and then the number of hours that they served under the CERT grant. It also has that certification statement, and it's got that employee and supervisor signature and date. Note, we do accept electronic timesheets with electronic signatures and dates, but they must have that information on there. Right, and then this is a sample pay stub for that same person. And again, we see that it's Intuit that processed it. It's got the information, it's got their name, it's got that same pay period, begin and end date from that timesheet. It shows the pay date, and then it shows the earnings. It shows their withholdings, their FICA, and shows a net pay. So this would be an acceptable documentation to document the payroll. The only other documentation you would need besides the timesheet in this payroll, again, would be proof that that payroll was paid. So again, that would most likely be a bank statement showing that payroll coming through your account. All right, this is a documentation sample for health insurance. This is an invoice from Florida Blue that you can see. Note it's got an invoice date of 10/1. The coverage period is within the contract date, so we'll be looking for that. It lists out an invoiced amount, the amount due, and then it also breaks out how much was paid for each employee. So if you've got that in your budget, any type of personnel fringe, or if you're claiming that in any of the management and admin, this documentation would be what we were looking for. We're going to need something directly from the benefit provider noting what is being paid. And then this is the sample. This is a check that was actually written for the health insurance. Note, same thing. It's got the date. It was written 10/1 for the coverage period of October 1 to October 31st, which does fall in that contract period. So this would be an acceptable documentation. And again, that third piece was to show that it cleared the bank. So it can either be a copy of that actual canceled check or a copy of your bank statement that notes that coming through your account. All right, this is a supply sample, an equipment where somebody bought the CERT kits. This is the invoice that came in. It's noting the date, fell within the contract period. It has the person that purchased it, and it's got the total amount. And if you note over to the right-hand side, it says payment method, debit card, Bank of America, BOA. So that tells us you paid it directly with your debit card. So the only other documentation we would need is copy of your bank statement showing that that cleared your account. Right, and this is to help with travel. I know several of you built in travel for the CERT conference. This is Volunteer Florida's travel reimbursement form. It's something that the state uses, so it's kind of universal. You do not have to use ours. You can use yours as long as it has the information we're looking for. We will provide a sample of this if you prefer to use it. It's just totally up to you. Again, it's got to have the staff person's name, the purpose of the travel. It's got to list the dates out. Listing the dates out separately, one line at a time, helps you ensure you're calculating your per diem and meals correctly. If you go to a conference and they provide meals, if you stay at a hotel and they provide breakfast, if you paid a registration fee that usually typically involves meals, you will not receive reimbursement for those meals. And so you can see here in the notes section on this form that notes the hotel provided breakfast on these dates and that lunch was provided at the training on those dates. So we would expect to see in the per diem amounts that those would not be included in the request for reimbursement. This form shows that we reimburse this employee $103. So what we would expect to see is your request for the $103. And then we will expect to see that Tina can do it as the staff person was reimbursed for those dollars. Also, we use a P card. So several of those expenses like the hotel and rental car were recorded at the bottom of the form because we use a P card. You can get reimbursed for those if they're in your approved budget. You would again follow the supporting documentation rules as provided earlier in providing a copy of that receipt. If you paid, say, the hotel by credit card, you would provide the credit card statement that showed that charge and then proof that that credit card statement cleared or that you paid it, and then you would be reimbursed for those costs as well. All right, and then I talked to you about having a sample of volunteer documentation to document the hours. This is one sample that was created. Note it's got your organization, it's got an authorizing official at the top and their signature information. This is going to be filled out for each volunteer that you have. So they would put their information in, they'd put when they served, the location they served, and how many hours, and that would be calculated at the end of each month. Pardon me, this would be an acceptable form to document volunteer hours. This is also a documentation sample. This actually came from one of the grantees in the past. Another great form to be used. It gives the location, dates, and times, and allows multiple volunteers to be put on here, along with their signatures, dates, their time in and out, and their total hours. And then this would just need at the end to be certified by someone at the organization. So again, this would be another acceptable piece of documentation. We can provide any samples of any of these forms for you if you would like. Just reach out to us. Otherwise, as long as your documentation provides the same information we're looking for, then it should be acceptable. If anybody ever has a question on whether or not their documentation meets our requirements, we ask that you, reach out to us before you submit it. It'll cut down on any delays in processing. We can help you walk through it. We can look at it. We can tell you what it's missing, what it doesn't, or if it does meet our requirements ahead of time. Okay.
Family question.
Right. Got a question.
Okay. A really good question. I'm going to stop Tracy for just a second. Came in that said, would a digital sign in, sign out work? And does it need a signature?
So yes, so we will accept electronic documentation. However, it still has to have those key things we're looking for. So it would still have to have signatures. It would still have to have an overriding signature at the end from the organization of somebody certifying those hours. Great question. All right.
Mhm.
All right, we're going to keep moving on then. All right, so we're going to switch gears a little bit over to the budget revision process. So if you find that you need to revise your original budget at any time in the grant year to help better serve your organization and your program needs, you may use a budget revision request form. This again is one of your contract exhibits and is an Excel. Um, so if you feel like this is an option, you must request approval from Volunteer Florida ahead of time. So if it's not in your approved budget, you must do that ahead of time and have it approved before you can purchase those items. So this is where staying on top of your expenditures and knowing what it is that you need will come in handy. If you know that you've got something that you really, really need, that you want to go ahead and get that budget revision done and submitted to us so it can be reviewed and approved so that you can go ahead with that purchase. The budget revision request form would be completed and must also include a signature and date and be sent directly to your program manager. You'll submit it to the program manager. The program manager will review it, and then they will get it over to finance, and then we'll be able to get back with you. One thing to remember is that it cannot include costs that were already incurred and paid for prior to your revision request date. And that were not in the original budget. So for instance, say you needed an item and you hurried up and bought it, but it wasn't in your original budget. And after the fact, you submitted a budget revision to us. That would not be an allowable expense because one, it was not in your approved budget at the time that you purchased it. And it was not approved. So keep that in mind. Right, again, all budget revision requests and the justification of the request must be submitted to your VF program manager. Grantees are allowed to submit a maximum of 2 budget revisions during this contract year. All final budget revision requests must be received by your program manager no later than June 30th. So that's that end of that third quarter. So we will allow you 2 for this grant year, and then that final one no later than the end of the third quarter for anything that you might see that you need in that fourth. We will review it. Grantees have a 5 business day clarification periods. So if we reach out to you with any requests or questions on that budget revision, you have 5 days to get back with us. If we do not hear from you, it will be voided out and you'll have to submit a new request. All right, and just something I want to mention about budget revisions too is not a lot of budget revisions. So I want to throw out there the 10% rule. So the 10% rule refers to if adjustments are needed to an already approved budget and their adjustments do not exceed 10% of your total budget, then you do not have to do a formal revision. So if you've got travel in the budget and you've budgeted already at a certain dollar amount and that dollar amount slightly went over, you do not have to do a budget revision. But if you did travel and it was only $100, but you've spent $4,000, then a budget revision is going to be required because that $4,000 is going to be more than 10% of your budget. So, for example, let's say your total budget was $20,000, which that includes your CERT and your match expenditures. 10% would be $2,000. So say you budgeted again that $500 in travel, but your travel was actually $1,200, which is just a difference of $700. Since that difference is less than 10% of your total budget, you would not have to complete a budget revision request form for this. This will not change your budget amounts in any category. So even though the budget is now you've used $1,200 in travel, that's going to mean that you're going to be $700 less in another budget line item because there's not going to be any, increase in funds in a budget revision. You're just moving those funds around. So we do allow that 10% so you don't have to do a budget revision for every couple dollars here or a couple dollars there. But that just means you will be short in another item or another line category. So you want to make sure that you are, watching your budget and looking over if that does happen. And just a quick note, adding a line or expense, adding a line item in the budget that is not included in this, and your already approved budget is not included in the 10% rule. So if you're trying to add something to your budget that was not yet there, it is not covered under 10% rule because it's not there. You do have to do a budget revision for those and get those approved prior to being able to purchase those.
And that 10% rule is cumulative.
Yes,
So you can't go over 10% throughout the year.
yes.
It's not just for instance.
So during my example, I did that $700. Well, 10% was $1,200. So if you had travel that went over 700, you now only have a $500 leeway. If you decided for the CERT conference that you only put $500 in the budget for, say, registration fees, and those registration fees are $1,000, you're now at that 10%. So anything after that, if you start going over or things were a little more expensive than you budgeted, you now have to do a budget revision request. All right, and so here is that budget revision request form. Again, it's one of your contract exhibits. In a budget revision request form, you have to, again, fill out the top. You've got to sign and date the bottom. The original budget columns is where you will enter your original budget number. So from that approved budget that is in your contract package, you will include those original budget numbers in those columns. The middle column says budget changes. Here is where you're going to note your increases and decreases. So you're going to take money from one area and move it to another area or another cost. Those should equal each other. Since in a budget revision, you're not changing the dollar amounts, of the budget, you're just moving things around to better serve your program. So those should zero out at the bottom. If you're moving $500 from one category, you must be adding $500 to another category. And then again, your revised budget will automatically calculate for you because this is also in Excel. And that will now have your new numbers incorporating those increases and decreases that you've requested. You'll also be required to provide that justifications and calculations information for anything that you're making a change to, just as you did with your original budgets. Right? The next two slides talk about this budget revision again, completing the lead agency and program name. This talks about everything that I just said. Right, next. Now, these next two slides give you an example. I couldn't fit it all on one, so I had to do half and half. So this first one shows you the top part of the form is completed. The original budget costs are entered. If you look down in the original budget sections, you'll see down in equipment costs, those were our original budget numbers. You'll see where I'm adding background checks in the organizational cost section because we didn't originally budget for those and decided we need to. So we took that cost from our banners. So you'll see down there in the budget changes section where I have subtracted $300 and I have moved that $300 up to the background check section. I have also in the justification and calculations column providing a justification for why I want to add that, and I also provided the calculation. And then for the bottom half of the form, you'll see the rest of our original budget costs. There were no other changes. You see at the bottoms where the budget totals in the original is still 10,000, 10,000. Our increases and decreases are zero because, again, they should equal each other. And then our revised budget is still 10,000, 10,000. And of course, the form is signed and dated. Right, that's just kind of what I talked about earlier, the process. You guys will complete a budget revision form. You'll complete it. You'll put your original budget information in. If you are on your second budget revision, you will take your original budget and that second budget revision will come from your first budget revision's revised budget. So you started out with your original budget, you requested it and you got a revised budget. That revised budget now becomes your budget. And if you do that second budget revision, that revised budget is now your original budget for that second request. Okay. We're now moving right along. So let's talk now about your invoice submission process. You will submit quarterly invoices, as we talked earlier, into our web-based Laserfish portal. You will include your PER invoice cover sheet along with all supporting documentation, no later than the 15th of the month after the end of each quarter. Again, those dates were provided for you earlier. Again, a cost reimbursement grant, therefore you can only put expenses on that PER that were paid. And it must be signed and dated. Volunteer Florida has 40 days contractually from the receipt of a correct and complete invoice to provide payment. So if you provide us with an invoice that is calculated correctly and provides all of the supporting documentation to back up the expenditures being claimed, you will receive your money within that 40-day time period. If we have to reach out for any clarifications, more documentation, or calculations are incorrect, this process will be delayed, and that time period will be delayed. And this is just the processing steps here. Once your invoice receives here, the VF staff will review it. Once it's reviewed, if there are no issues, it'll be processed as is. If there's more information needed, the staff will send a notification from the Laserfish system, noting the requested invoice revisions, questions, documentation, clarifications, etc. And you will have 5 business days to submit those back to us. If we do not receive anything within those 5 business days, and Nick does a great job of sending out those reminders, he will also reach out to you on that last 5th business day to give you that last ditch, hey, just waiting for that information. If we do not receive it, we will go ahead and revise the invoice based on what we can deem allowable, and then we will process that and issue a check for those costs. He will then provide you with an email that notes what has been removed so that you can either claim that on a future invoice or a final invoice. If there's anything that you believe that we should have additional information for that was in addition to the documentation I talked about, please provide it. The more documentation, the better. Document, document, document. I know you've heard this, and if you've heard my trainings, I say it all the time. If it was not in writing, then it didn't happen. All right, so that was it for now. Right after this, we'll kind of go to the Laserfish portal, and then we will be done. So I'll go ahead and stop for just a moment for any questions that may have popped up in the chat.
So the first question came from Irene, and she asked, since the state and national CERT conferences are in August of 2026, will that be a problem for reimbursement?
So no, the August invoice is due to us by September 15th. So as long as you're able to get your supporting documentation in to submit by the 15th, it should not be a problem for you. Again, we allow that 30 days after the contract ends. So I'll add 15 more days and give you till September 30th. So as long as you do not have a problem with making the payments on any credit card purchases or any problem with getting the documentation for that, there should not be an issue.
Hopefully that was answered for Irene. Just give me a heads up. Okay. The next question that came in was, would a 214 work for a example of a volunteer? So Nick will ask you to answer this one. So
you know what a Form 214?
What is
so
Yeah, I'm not sure what a 214.
They actually have at the top of the form, it has the leader, and it has all of the names of who was involved, and it has the time they started and the time they ended on that form. And then down in the center part, it has basically each time what they did, where they were at, all of that on the form.
I think as long as it's verified by someone, then that would fit all of the requirements we would need.
Yep, as long
Okay.
as there's that signature. Yep.
Mhm.
So James, you heard that. As long as there's a signature on that 214 and it's filled out correctly, it should work as reimbursement.
Yep. And again, you're like Robin had said, you're welcome to send that to us ahead of time so that we can review it and make that determination for you directly.
Okay, I see. So for what Irene is saying, as long as the purchase is made for that training before the end of October, the end of August, I mean, that proof of payment, as long as you paid for it before the end of August, that proof of payment, getting that statement sometime in September is okay. And I think we could do something like an extension for that, because she's saying it might be up to the 20th.
Okay.
I think we've done that in the past.
So yeah, so the reason we do that final invoice is directly for that reason. If you incurred, as long as those costs are incurred by August 31st, They don't necessarily have to be paid by August 31st. They can be paid in September. They just have to be incurred. So if you're talking about a credit card purchase, so you purchased, use the credit card for your CERT expenditures. If you are unable to get your credit card statement by, I would say by the 15th of September to submit that invoice, then that's okay.
Just let us know.
You just let us know, and we can work with you on that. Again, we also have that September 30th date. So if you can't get it on, on that last invoice, you can get it on that final invoice. And we can work with you. And yes, you do not have to pay that credit card off directly. As long as you did make a payment and we're able to see that that payment covers the cost that you are claiming for those CERT expenditures, we will most definitely accept that as well.
So basically is our team is willing to work with you guys. I know majority of the teams are sending people to conferences this year with this grant. So we will work with you. That's what I'm hearing from my finance team. So I want you to feel, supported. Preston asks right here, when submitting documentation for credit card purchases, do bank statements need to show the full credit card balance paid? So I think, Tracy, you just answered that, that as long as there is a payment
That covers.
So $500 is paid and that's what you're asking for, that you should be good to go.
Yep.
What other questions does anybody have on the call for financial and what we've gone over? There is not a dumb question. I've been in your shoes,
No.
so please ask it. I would rather you ask because it's somebody else in this group may not know. So, okay. So there you see Brandon's question. Is there a signature required for each volunteer individually or the signature of the program manager certifying the hours appropriate for the sign-in sheets? Currently, the online is a software that does not have an option to collect signatures.
So yes, I think as long as there is somebody in the organization that is overall confirming and certifying the hours were served, that is acceptable. Is that correct, Nick?
I think for like individual volunteers, like electronic signature, I think as long as we have their names on there for that electronic form, we can use that for the volunteers individually. But yeah, like Tracy said, we just need a signature on the overall form certifying them.
Yep. So Brandon, I think that would work as long as you or someone on your team verifies that it's actual, that they'll take that signature. So hopefully that answers your question. I know that's anything going with the software that people log in on the computer and it shows their times of log in, log out. I think it's very appropriate. So if you've got that, if you're a question on any volunteer sign-in sheet, feel free, send me an email, send Nick. I will share his contact in the chat.
It's in here.
Please, it is already in here, sorry. It'll be on the screen. So please send that to Nick. If he questions it, he'll come show it to me. This is one big happy family. So super excited. For those of you who don't know, there are 15 programs represented today on this call, 2 of which are brand new programs to CERT. So please know that all of these teams can work together and help each other. We'll talk tomorrow about that at the state call and the working group. But any other questions for finance team while you have them here in the room? Questions about, your anything financially.
All right, well, let's move on to Laserfish. We're almost done. You're almost there. So Laserfish, so again, this is our web-based invoice submission portal. And this is what you'll use in submitting those quarterly invoices. Go right ahead. All right, so this slide gives you the web address. This is something you're going to want to save as you'll refer to it and be submitting here. This is our original invoice submission portal. Go ahead to the next. Once you go to that portal, this is what it's going to look like. This is what you're going to pull up. Everything with a red asterisk, you're going to be required to fill out. So your funding source, you're going to pull the drop-down menu, and for this grant, you're going to choose the Community Emergency Response Team. Once you do that, it'll bring up PER quarter. Here you're going to choose either Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, or at the end, you're going to do final. Again, the PER year, and that'll be 25-26. You will then choose your subgrantee's organization. Your organization will be listed here as it is on your W-9. So when you click that drop down, you will choose that. Getting to supporting documents. There are 2 ways you can do this, and we ask if if all possible, that you can upload that in one PDF. So including that PER form and your documentation, if you can put that into one PDF. If you click on the upload button, it'll take you to your files for you to choose and upload that way. You can also click and drag and just drop your documents right in that area in Laserfish. There are no size limitations to Laserfish, so no one should have any issues with any of your PDFs or documents being too large. The submitter information. Here you'll fill out the first name, last name, email, and phone number for the person that you would like us to communicate with on this invoice. So the submitter would be, if we needed to reach back out for further information, this is the information the system will use to communicate with your organization for those requests. So make sure whoever you're putting in here is going to be someone that will be able to receive those messages and respond to those messages. All right, and this is a step-by-step information that I just talked you through. Just put it in here in writing for you to refer back to. Okay. Again, that's your step-by-submitter information. All right, once you upload your forms and you click on the submit button, you should get a message on the screen that says the invoice has been submitted. If you do not receive that, there is a good chance we did not receive it, so you may want to try it again. You will also get that message, and then you will also should receive a confirmation email. This right here is a sample of that email that will come out. It will not come directly from one of us here at Volunteer Florida. You note that the email address it's going to come from is that volunteerfl@mccicloud.io. I would suggest that you save this so that it does not go to your spam folder. This is where all of our communication will directly come, and it will come directly from Laserfish. The only thing that you'll typically get back from us is, that email at the end if we've had to remove something from your invoice. When you get this confirmation email, it's going to say thank you for submitting your PER. It's going to note the PER, whether it's quarter 1, 2, 3, or 4, or final, and the year. It's also going to give you something called an instance ID number. You're going to want to hold on to this email just in case you have to provide further documentation for this request. The reason I tell you that is that instance ID number is going to be needed for you to resubmit information. If you use the original portal to submit it again, it's going to create a whole nother file. It's going to tell you you've already submitted that. It's going to be misfiled, and it's not going to let you do it. So making sure that you hold on to this email and know that instance ID number to be used in our update portal in case you have any clarifications or documentation that needs to be submitted after the fact. If you do need to submit further information, or if we have questions, you're going to receive this email. This is going to be an update requested email. It's going to say, thank you, we've reviewed, and this is what we need. And it's going to list out everything that we are requesting you to provide. Again, you'll see that you must provide no later than the close of business 5 days after the email's been sent. It lets you know that if we don't receive it, we're going to remove it. Again, here in this email, you can go directly to the update portal, which is going to be a separate portal than that original portal. You can get to it by clicking here, or the next slide is going to give you the ID. And in this notice, it talks about that instance ID again. So it gives you that instance ID number again. Again, if you get a clarification, you're going to want to use that instance ID so that those documents go into the system and they actually will automatically go into that file for us to review. And again, this is that Laserfish invoice update portal. You will only use that if you've already submitted and we've requested further information. All right, and once you go to that, you'll see at the top, notice it says Subgrantee Update Portal. You'll see that number 1, it says Instance ID. So it's going to want that ID directly from that email. You want to make sure that you're including the correct ID number. Again, funding source, quarter, and your year, all the same as before. Same thing for the subgrantee organization. And then that email that was originally used for the submission will need to be included here as well. And then again, you would upload your corrected documents and click on submit. And then this gives you the same thing that I just talked to you about, step by step. And that's it. Very easy, very great, electronic, very easy system to use. No usernames, no passwords. Anyone within your organization can use it. It is web-based. So, all right. As promised, these are our finance contact information for both Nick and I. So you may contact us at any time. Please contact us at any time with any of your questions. Just like Robin said, there are no dumb questions. We are always here to assist you. We want you to be successful. We want you to spend the money. We want you to be able to, put forth those plans that you've applied for. So please reach out to us. Again, if you have a question about your documentation, reach out to us ahead of time. You're having issues, you're unsure of whether something is allowable, please reach out to us. All right. Well, that is all I have for you guys today. Are there any other questions that we can answer while we're on the phone?
I don't know if anybody's typing, but just want to say thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Nick, for being here and for allowing everyone to answer and ask their questions. So since I don't see any questions in the chat, I'm just going to say thank you guys for all attending. Thank you for being here. Look forward to working with you this year. And this is it. We'll go ahead and end the meeting.
Have a great day.